Where I come from, you can't eat antlers, so let's go.
Smoked them. The perfect knife for cutting your underwear.
Oh, you might have to take a beer run while we're out hunting.
Did y'all see that? I hope y'all saw that, because that's what they look like.
Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson or Travis? How do you like to be approached?
Travis.
I got a brother named Travis, so that's easy to remember. And then also Travis Kelsey, the girls in the house, they're obsessed with him.
I'm a big Swiftie too, so like it's right in my wheelhouse.
Okay. I like starting off with the good stuff.
There you go.
So the wife has been one forever, right? Just forever. She can't not be one. I understand. I'm guilty by association. I have now kind of inherited it. I could tell you anything you want to know, and I bring in such irrelevant information. My daughter today was just telling me about all these theories and stuff. She's got to see Deadpool at midnight because there's the rumor of her being a superhero that gets killed in the first few seconds. And I'm like, I'm in.
Yeah, it's the best community.
Look at that. all Florida friendship bracelets.
I have all Florida friendship bracelets. Next week at ICAST, I'll be passing out all Florida friendship bracelets. Like I love even if you don't like Taylor Swift's music, I love the community around Taylor Swift. Like the little, like if we could steal some pages from her playbook, that would be a good idea. Like from the sportsman's conservation side.
Yeah.
Like they're genuine people. They love each other. They lift each other up. They're not attacking each other.
Oh
like,
man, you go to the concerts and they're just, random people are handing these bracelets out for no reason. They spend hours making them just to freely hand them off. It is pretty wild.
It's good to meet a fellow Swiftie in the outdoors world in Florida.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know about your demographics, but like I don't run across a lot of them, but there are a few out there. There are a few out there.
Well, it's like if you remember back in 2016, like summer 2016, when nobody was going to vote for Trump, and they're talking about it in the office, like, damn, I'm not voting for Trump. I'm not voting for Trump, and all they did was secretly go do it.
Yeah,
that's what
covert.
it is.
They're all covert Swifties. That's what
I can't. It's all covert. You been to the show yet?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Been to the Eras Tour?
Absolutely. Night 2 in Tampa.
Night 2 in Tampa. I did night 1 in Tampa, and then the girls went for night 2.
Okay, so they were there the night I was. That was incredible.
Oh yeah, it's a great show.
Best concert I've ever been to.
It is hands down the best. What beats it? I don't know. Nothing.
I don't know if I can see. I have Taylor Swift hands, like the heart hands on my desk behind me, and like,
dude, you gotta love it.
See them right there?
Oh, I do see them. That's perfect.
One of my employees at the Duck Ranch bought those for me for Christmas.
Oh, see, look, and you know what? They were probably secretly playing it. You're like, you know what? This ain't a bad idea.
It's not secret, man. We've got a whole impoundment at our Duck Ranch named Taylor, and then the blinds are named after songs.
Oh, tell me about these. What are the blinds named?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask me that.
If you could just think of one.
Yeah. So there's daylight because you're watching the sun like that. You have to watch. So it's called daylight. There's a haunted. There's a you're on your own kid because you're way out removed from everything else. Every person at the Duck Ranch gets an impoundment they get to name after.
Yeah.
And so the landowner, he named his classic. We named his classic because he doesn't have a favorite artist, but he likes classic rock. So in this case, the blinds are like AC/DC or GNR or Led Zeppelin or whatever. Another guy loves Eric Church, and so we've named his blinds after like
that ain't bad.
Or Carolina or whatever. And mine was Taylor, and we've named them all after Taylor stuff.
That's awesome, dude. If you get like a big one, and you just call it the All Too Well 10-meter the 10-meter version or something.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
It's amazing. Like, it's funny to talk about it, but it's amazing. Like out in the world, how many people are actually Swifties that are in conservation or hunting. Like will message us because I'll lean into it, man. I'll do videos or reels or stuff with Taylor Swift behind it, and you'd be amazed how many people are like, "Oh, I'm here for this. Like, I want to come home with you now. I want to come do this now." And I'm like, "You recognize it's just a blind. It has no tie to Taylor Swift, but
we don't listen to like the album while we're in here. It's just
like,
named
we're not
after
singing along or anything. Like, anyway, yeah, we made Duck Ranch and bracelets last year and gave them away.
That's awesome.
It was awesome, man. It's
awesome.
Awesome too is the fathers and daughters that bonded over that.
Oh yeah,
a lot of dads that are closet Swifties that are, their 7-year-olds in the back seat listening.
It would be the same as like any dad that would sit here and be able to recite every word of like the Moana soundtrack.
Yeah, it's no different.
It's no different. Like
It's no
if
different.
that's what they like, that's what's playing right now. If you were to get in my truck and press play on my radio, it's going to be every WWE entrance song on people on the main roster right now. And there's no reason to be ashamed of anything. I watch the hell out of wrestling.
Yeah,
And
lean
now in
into
the
it, brother.
past like 3 months, my kids have been diehard WWE fans to the point where it's like you can't, they're just injured all the time because they don't know how to wrestle. So they just beat the heck out of each other.
Yep.
But it's constant. I'm at work. I'm getting live chats from the girls, my sons. Oh, this person's saying, I'm like, you watching? Yeah, I'm watching, dude. And people want to make funny, but that's like that old school, like, it's fake. Well, yes, I know it's fake. I watched Kyle Brandt from the NFL Network. He said he went to WrestleMania this year, and people say, I can't believe this. It's fake, right? And he's like, well, I watched Dune 2 yesterday. I'm pretty sure that was fake too. They're not trying to pretend to be anything else. Just like, if you do like Taylor Swift and like listening to it, but you also like being in the woods, don't pretend to be anything else.
Yeah.
It's okay. Though she's got some
Okay.
bangers. It's okay.
It's 2024. We do anything we want now.
Yeah. I actually identify as Taylor Swift. I just not her bank account.
I got news for you, man. That's not that's yeah, you don't appear to look like Taylor Swift, but it's fine.
No. Still cute though. Hey, I appreciate you coming on. We're starting right off rip with the swizzle talk, but that's all right.
Yeah.
If they want to turn off, go ahead. We'll change the subject. That's fine. We'll circle back. But the Travis, you had reached out to me, which when people do, I couldn't be more appreciative. You had said that you had come across the podcast and you wanted to get on and talk about Florida's right to hunt and fish. I had told you also for the past 4 weeks, I've been looking for somebody to talk to about it. A lot of people wanted to do like an in-person deal, which I love doing in-persons, but my camper was my podcast studio and a massive tree limb went through it, and we're on month 3 of it being repaired. And so whenever I get that back, I'm back to doing in-persons. But until then, I can only do this, right? So I appreciate you coming on and wanting to talk about it. And I guess before we dive into that portion, if you don't mind, just if people don't know who you are, just spitting who Travis Thompson is.
Yeah, so the quick and dirty is Travis Thompson. I'm a 5th-generation Floridian. Family's been in Florida since 1870-ish. Married, got a couple of kids. They're grown now, but almost grown now.
Mm-hmm.
And my son's 18, so he's just graduated high school. I run.
Congrats on that. Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. I run duck ranching, which is the largest waterfowl hunting operation in the state of Florida.
Mm-hmm.
I used to run Cast and Blast Florida, which at one point was the #1 rated podcast in the state of Florida for wilderness. And I am the executive director for a nonprofit called All Florida, which we work on conservation issues that we say woods, water, wildlife, way of life.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning woods being the land, water being, your lakes, your rivers, your water supply, everything else. Wildlife being all the animals, whether we hunt them, fish them, or just enjoy watching them.
Yep.
And way of life being not just hunting and fishing, but also agriculture, ranching, the stuff that kind of makes Florida special and gives us character and culture and everything else. So we advocate pretty widely across a lot of spectrums. And that's me. And that's like the 2-minute elevator pitch of me and what I do and where I work and what I work on. So if I'm not in a duck blind during duck season, I am generally in a boardroom or on a boat with a lawmaker, legislator, rulemaker, policy scientist, trying to figure out how we can make better stuff for all of the stuff that we care about.
Well, I'll just say it, appreciate what you do. A lot of people don't have the time or the want. They just want to wake up and live. But sometimes it is people like you that do this stuff behind the scenes that nobody's seeing, that do make those big drastic changes for the better, for if it's not even just the hunter or the fisherman, and for the people that live here that that do just like to look at animals. I mean, I couldn't tell you a time in my life where you're driving down a road, whether it be in the fanciest, nicest neighborhood or the back roads of Ramsey Bend, you see a deer and you lose your mind. You're just like, oh, there's one. Or you see a hog or something. Oh, there's one. Look at him go.
My wife calls it wildlife Tourette's.
That's what it is.
I
Yeah.
have, I have wildlife Tourette's because I'm driving down the road. It doesn't matter what, oh, look at eagle. Oh, look at spoonbill. Oh, look at
Yeah.
deer. Look at turtle. Oh, look at
Yeah.
like, she's like, it doesn't matter. She could be like, telling me, pouring her guts out to me. I'm going to interrupt because
Yeah.
there's wildlife that we need to identify right now.
I'm a big fan of, or I know I'm a big fan of it. Don't know if my wife is, but I'll be driving and you get towards like say going up 75 and you start getting into it gets really hilly and a lot more woods up in just north of like Dade City and stuff. And I'll look at her and be like, you see that the patch of woods right there? There's deer in there. So now it's it's like, oh wow, great, thanks. And now it's, when she drives by, she goes, there's deer in there, Stephen. And I'm like, damn right, there's deer in there. And I'm not hunting them, but they're good. It's cool to know that they're in there.
It's you just making notes for later.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Let me get on my Onyx and see if Granny's okay with me swinging by the house and getting me a weekend hunt here. But no, you see all sorts of, it's like just seeing a bald eagle. Like people want to take it for granted, but like how cool it is to just see something like that. I see them at work. I work at Hillsborough County Fire Rescue, and behind our station, we have the newest station in the county. It's a Taj Mahal of. I'm pretty spoiled being at that one, because whenever I go to another one that's 40 years old, I'm like, look at this trash. But there's another county like water building there, and there's a gas pump, and I went to fuel up there one evening, and there's a bald eagle sitting on top of it, and just the most random place. But you just sit, I'm taking pictures of it, sending it. I'm like to my wife, like, look at this bald eagle, and some people are like, cool, dude, but I'm thinking like, what the hell, the bald eagle, bro? Oh, I'm sorry. Did you see one yesterday or something that I don't know? We used to see them across the street from Golden Corral when I was younger, when they had all the land wasn't developed. There's just a Golden Corral off of like State Road 52, and you'd see them all. They'd have their nest up there. Like I get why people watch them for 24 hours on camera sometimes. It's just it's something you don't see every day, but because of like what you're doing, you can see them more and protect them more. So very much appreciate everything you do.
So all of that said, by the way, I paused awkwardly there because I'm anti-bald eagle. That's the one
Yeah,
thing that I hate bald eagles.
I understand. I just think they're so
It's,
cool, man.
anybody listening to this that knows me is like, is he going to say something about this? They
That's
know
okay. That's
I
all
hate
right.
bald eagles, but I love all wildlife, just not bald eagles. That's the
I'm
only one I
super
don't.
annoyed by sandhill cranes, but I think they're pretty cool to look at.
Yeah,
It's
like I
one of
just
those things. That's all right.
bald eagles are like the worst of the vultures in my mind.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, so you asked a little bit about like we wanted to get together so we could talk about right to fish and hunt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the constitutional amendment. So
Yep. Amendment 2.
yeah, so Amendment 2 is on the ballot this November. It's kind of an interesting story, kind of how we got it there. Um, there's a state representative, Lauren Mello, who's down in
Mm-hmm.
Naples. She grew up with her dad and mom as hunters and anglers. Like her
Mm-hmm.
mom, she remembers her mom like fishing in a tarpon tournament like a couple of days after she had breast cancer surgery and stuff. Like she grew up around hunting and fishing, and so she wanted to put this through to get it on the ballot as like a legacy bill, as like an honor to her parents and an honor to like the state that she grew up in and loves. And so myself and Mike Elfenbein with Isaac Walton League of Isaac Walton League of America Cypress chapter, we kind of like championed it and built this coalition out around getting. There's a couple ways you can get something on a ballot. You can go collect signatures at the mall, like you see some people doing on
Yeah.
other amendments. In that case, you got to get almost 1 million signatures. And then when you get the signatures, you got to get it approved by the Supreme Court, like for judicial review to make sure it's an enforceable law. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's several steps to that. The other way you can do it is a constitutional review committee, which happens every 20 years. Our next
Mm-hmm.
one won't be 2040.
Okay.
And the last way you can do it is you can get the Senate and House of the state of Florida to do a joint resolution saying, if it passes, that this is allowed to go on the ballot for people to vote on to determine if they want, this to be a constitutional amendment. And in our case, it was a right to fish and hunt.
Mm-hmm.
And so we worked really hard on this. There was a group called International Order of Theodore Roosevelt.
Mm-hmm.
They're from out of state, but they came in and helped us a lot with the groundwork on this, with building out the coalition, everything else. And so we got it through the Senate and House combined 154 to 1. We had bipartisan support. We had bipartisan co-sponsors. Like the one nay vote, she actually was a protest vote on something else. She's like, I don't have a problem with this. I'm just voting no so I can talk about this other issue.
Mm.
So like not a super controversial topic when you look at it
Yeah,
that way.
it's not.
The language in it, we templated off of other states that already have a constitutional right to fish and hunt. So there's 23 states that have this currently.
Hmm.
Florida's the only state in the southeastern United States that doesn't have it.
Okay. I
Uh,
was going to ask you what like region wise would those 23 states be, but it seems
I
like the
mean,
South is spearheading it pretty good.
23, if Florida passes, that's 24. It's almost half the country. But
Yeah.
I mean, Vermont was the first one ever in Northeast United
Hmm.
States. They did it in 1777.
It's like, okay.
So but I was talking to somebody else
It's a,
about this morning, and I gave him that stat, and he's like, "Wow!" And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, but if you think about it, the framers of the U.S. Constitution and the creators of state constitutions, as states became, things,
hmm.
never in their wildest dreams did they think we would need to protect the right to fish and hunt.
Yeah.
Because, like, who thinks in 1846 or whatever, 1845, 1846, when Florida became a state, hunting and fishing are always going to exist, right?
Yeah. And then you're not also thinking about technological advances and mass influx of people becoming residents in major neighborhoods and things like that. You're not thinking any of that. Kind of think
Yeah,
the way of life now is how it's going to be.
exactly. So it makes sense that it wasn't included initially, but it also makes sense to amend it and put it in now
Mm.
to ensure that it exists. Roosevelt always said, for generations in the womb of time. And I like the way that sounds because you said you've got 4 kids.
Hmm.
Your kids, great grandkids, you're never going to meet.
No.
But if we can get this passed and we can get our people to show up and vote yes on Amendment 2, those people, those kids you're never going to meet, like their great great grandfather will have had a hand in ensuring that that legacy, that heritage, that conservation tool exists
Yeah.
150 years.
Yeah. No, it's fantastic. And I don't think people think about future stuff as much when it comes to because if I'm not mistaken, voting yes, it's done. There's nowhere else. It can't be rehashed, or can it be rehashed in 20 years? God forbid someone's got a problem with it.
So it's very difficult to rehash it. That's
Yeah.
why I kind of outlined the 3 ways you can do a
Hmm.
change to the Constitution.
Yeah.
In those changes, so today, for this to pass in November, we've got to get 60% of the votes plus one person,
Hmm.
right? It's not just 50% plus
Yeah.
one,
Yeah.
it's 60% plus one.
Hmm.
And a constitutional amendment threshold will probably change in the next year or two to
Hmm.
67%. So it's going to become very difficult if this passes to
Yeah.
then remove it, you would have to get 67% to vote against it, which would seem like
Crazy.
a big barrier to overcome. And there could be rules that change around how you get stuff onto the ballot to vote on.
Yeah.
But given the rules that we have today, you have to get like the million signatures is some percentage of the votes cast in the last presidential election. So theoretically, as the population grows, that threshold also goes up. So you're going to have to get more signatures to get something on the ballot. So could it be undone? Yes. But if it got undone, it's overwhelmingly supported that people wanted it undone.
Yeah.
There's never the
It
appetite
doesn't.
for.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, I know my question is it's just a question, but the idea, like you said, for that many people, that percentage to jump up and then say, "Hey, we don't want the right to hunt and fish," it doesn't make any sense. But I just wanted to know, just as like a knowledge standpoint, on like, is that something that actually can be reversed?
I
Um,
live in the world where like I work with cattle ranchers a lot on conservation.
mhm.
100 years ago, the idea of not eating meat was kind of a foreign concept.
Yeah.
Now we all know someone that's a vegan. We all know someone that's a vegetarian. We all like not just for health reasons, some that choose to be. And so you see a societal shift that happens over time.
Hmm.
What happens with hunting? What happens with fishing over time? This protects against that societal shift to some
Yeah.
degree.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. And that amendment on the ballot will be in every county in the state of Florida come November, correct?
Yes, if you're voting in the state of Florida, um, there's 4 amendments, I think, on the ballot. Amendment 1 is the partisan school board. Amendment
Mhm.
3 is marijuana. Amendment 4 is abortion. Amendment 2 is right to fish and hunt. So no matter where you stand on that other stuff, right to fish and hunt, you should want to vote yes on,
Yeah.
because it's, I mean, so I talk about this stuff a lot, but if you don't fish or hunt, and you're like, why would I vote yes on this? I don't fish or hunt. Do you like wild stuff? Like you were just talking about seeing bald eagles.
Mhm.
You like nature? Do you like, because largely what's wild in the United States exists on the back of sportsmen, like
Oh yeah.
historically on the back of sportsmen.
We probably
Uh,
fund most of all conservation there is, and we're also the most hated people.
so yes, we want to be able to go hunt whitetail deer.
Mhm.
The habitat where the whitetail deer lives is also where the scrub jay lives. It's also where the gopher tortoise lives. It's also where the diamondback rattlesnake lives. It's also where you could go way down the trophic layers to animals that we would never hunt or chase or anything else. They're able to exist in these wild places because we have these places set aside so that we can hunt.
Mhm.
Similarly, you look on the fishing side, like we need clean water so that we have good fisheries and healthy seagrass beds and all the things that
Mhm.
make us successful as humans in civilization.
Yep.
Does fishing make or break us? No, but the act of fishing requires those other things to exist. So it's like a harbinger of what we get. And there's also, we get federal dollars for like sport fish restoration. It's called WISFR, Wildlife and Sport Fish Restoration Funds. And these are the dollars that are matched from the federal side for our license fees. We
Mhm.
pay a hunting license fee or a fishing license fee, and we get either wildlife funds or SFR funds, sport fish restoration funds, that come back to the state. There's not a public boat ramp in Florida that I know of that doesn't have fishing license dollars in the concrete.
Yeah.
Like it may be owned by your county, it may be owned by your city, but SFR funds go into that. So if you just want to go out and jet ski, water ski, kayak, you have no
Mm.
interest in a fishing pole, you have no interest in killing an animal or anything else, but you like to be on that lake and enjoy that lake, or on that river and enjoy that river, or in that bay or whatever, you probably should thank a fisherman for how you got into it, because they
Oh.
helped pay for the ramp that you just used. It's critically important we keep this stuff together, because if not, what happens to access? What happens to public lands? What happens to wild places? Like it goes way beyond just wanting to be able to fish and hunt. This is an
Mhm.
amendment that everybody should vote yes on.
No, absolutely. You're listen, if anybody didn't know and they're listening right now, like you're crushing it on how you get someone to do it. And you're not even you're not persuading anything. You're just spitting what is. Yeah, I never knew that those funds go to public boat ramps, right? I always figured they were tax dollars, whatever. And yeah, not everybody fishes, but if you do love being on the water, that couple that just like kayaking, through the mangroves, how you ain't getting in there. How are you keeping those mangroves healthy?
Yep.
So you could take those sweet pictures for your Instagram and things like that. No, it's 100% way more than just fishing and hunting. I mean, clean water itself. Like think of like the last disaster we had there in I don't think it was Sarasota or Bradenton, where they had
Piney Point.
that's Pine Point spill. I mean, how long did we have to go without being able to keep a snook, a red, or a trout? 3 years, 4 years, was it? I mean, over our own stupidity, and you can't take any of it for granted, because just like that, it was gone for, just thinking about people that would charter fish, and they're taking people out just to catch fish. You ain't keeping your fish. You're just gonna hopefully be able to experience the catch.
Yep.
And those things are sad. Those things are absolutely sad.
And that's the stuff that I want. I, I'm a hunting guide. I'm on the board of Florida Guides Association. I didn't mention
Hmm.
that earlier. I'm on the board of Florida Guides Association. I get like the economic benefits of fishing, hunting in the state.
Hmm.
But at my heart, I'm a conservationist, man.
Hmm.
The thing I care most about is the stuff that makes this state special. And I've said this on other podcasts before, but like the strip mall, the subdivision, you could pick that stuff up and set it in Omaha, Nebraska. And outside of it getting some snow on it, it's basically the same.
Hmm.
The springs, the bays, the estuaries, the rivers, the palmettos, the flats, the scrub, the swamps, the stuff that we have is the stuff that makes this place intrinsically special.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to make sure that I do everything, I get, good Lord willing, I get 80, 90 years on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
And I want it devoted. Yeah, my wife and kids, I want it devoted to them, but I also want it devoted to protecting and stewarding this place that I was so fortunate to be born, that I love dearly. Like it's just such a special, incredible place. We can't destroy what makes it special and incredible.
I mean, and is this state not just like the holy mecca of all things outdoors? I mean, the only thing we don't have is skiing, snow-like things, and even then, you can find a facility that's got fake snow to let you sled down. But I mean, just the game animals alone. Here's one. I was in Syria a couple years ago on a deployment, and I was attached to a Montana unit, and this guy, I can't remember his name, but he was showing me these pictures of these beautiful 6x6 bulls that he had shot, and I was like, dude, that seems awesome. He's like, bro, whenever you want, come up. We'll go to Walmart. We'll get your out of state tags and we'll see what we can do on some public land. I said, one of these days, dude, I'm gonna hit you up. He said, actually, if we do that, can we flip flop and you do the same thing for me? And I'm thinking he's going straight to Osceola, Turkey, right? That's the only place you can get him is here. This is where I think he's going. He says, I've always wanted to shoot a boar.
Wow.
A pig. And I said, a
Yep.
pig? And he's like, yeah, dude, it just seems super cool. And they got the tusks. It just seems awesome. And I said, buddy, I can bring you behind a Benihana or a Chick-fil-A and we could take care of one of those. Like they're hitting them things on Bruce B. Downs, but it's like just because, out west, they got Montanas and they got mule deer. People still look at this place with the gator hunting and they look at this place and they go, that's the place. I'm telling you, we are lucky to have been born here and be able to take in the wildlife that's here and the opportunity you have to harvest animals, to just see them. Like I told you before, seeing a deer since I was a kid, I'd freak out and I still do it to this day. You see them flagging and running, you're like, damn, this is a good day. And it'll be June and you're just driving around drinking a few beers and you see them, you're like, damn, boy, look, them girls look good. They look healthy. A couple nannies right there, and it's perfect. So like when he said the boar hog thing, I'm like, I can never take this stuff for granted because that is a boar hog, as they are fun to hunt. They are a nuisance and they're an issue, but you take it for granted of how well you have it with that kind of game animal, like peacock bass. I'll tell anybody, a peacock bass hits harder than any bass I've ever caught. And they are incredibly fun. Well, you only got a small area to do it, and it's either here or South America. Which one would you want to go to? Which one's cheaper to go to? So yeah, you can't take advantage of it.
You know, I somebody told me this a long time ago, and I've parroted it a few times. But we're recording this in early July,
Hmm.
first third of July. This month in July, deer season will open in the state of Florida, in South Florida.
July 31st, almost
30th or
every year.
31st. It's 30th or 31st it opens this year.
It's unreal.
We've got alligators in August. Then we go
Hmm.
into archery, muzzleloader, bow, waterfowl, early teal,
Yeah, that's
all
September,
the way,
early
yeah,
teal.
September's early teal, all the way through the end of April. So from July, the month of July,
Hmm.
there's the calendar month. It's May, June are the only 2 months you cannot hunt something in.
That's when you're fishing.
And I have not mentioned at all the incredible quality of the bass fishing capital of the world, the tarpon capital of the world. Domestically, the only place you can catch a snook, like maybe it's like South Padre Island in Texas, you can catch one. But
Hmm.
if you want to catch a snook, this is where you come.
Yep.
We've got incredible red fisheries. We've got incredible offshore fisheries. Like the joke always was Louisiana is a sportsman's paradise, and it is. I've been there and enjoyed it. It's beautiful and it's incredible and special.
Hmm.
But dude, there ain't nothing holding a candle to Florida for a sportsman's
No.
paradise.
If I had the cojones to do what the boys in South Florida do, which is go full Florida man and hunt July 30th bow season in the hottest part of the year, in the hottest part of the state, I could hunt from July 30th whitetail. And as long as I don't hit my maximum of 5 deer, hunt all the way to Valentine's Day in
Yeah.
Zone B, Florida. And that's where I hunt. And that's another crazy thing when you talk about, people ask that question too, on why why would you start then? Well, these 4 areas of deer zones that we have, these deer rut in different time frames. So
Yep.
if you start hunting July 30th, you're going to see bucks chasing.
Yep.
You're going to go to zone C and you'll see bucks chasing about mid-October to that for 2 weeks. And then you'll come to zone B where guess what? Merry Christmas, noses are to the ground chasing through New Year's. And then the same thing happening up in the Panhandle. It's it's an outdoor paradise. It really
Mhm.
is. And then as far as the 2 months where there's no hunting season, that's when you do your hog removal stuff, which is just as fun. And I'm telling you, I've done a lot of hog hunting in my time, and I don't think they're as stupid as people make them out to be.
Oh no, they're
Uh,
very smart.
they're
Very
incredibly
smart.
smart, and I think people think they're dumb because there's an abundance of them. They think it's easy. Well, let me tell you something about a hog. Standing upright, his nose is only about 8 inches from the ground. What do you think he's smelling the entire time he's walking? Every boot print you've put on that place. You know, the deer, they smell great too, but a hog, I mean, the way they communicate with each other, I've had more issues killing hogs than with deer because sometimes they'll outsmart you. The way they come around, they come downwind, they'll all get all up to the same palmetto bush. You'll see their little noses, and then they all take off.
We've got a hog trap out behind the house here that's
Hmm.
overgrown and everything.
Hmm.
People are like, man, that's not going to work. I'm like, it works fine. They're like, what do you mean? I was like, well, the hogs won't come around because they've learned,
Hmm.
you trap 2 in it, 3 in it, and they've gotten
Yep.
trap shy, but they know it's almost like a force field. They
Yeah.
know the trap. And so for years, they don't come in my yard anymore.
And then just how evolution works, they're literally teaching their newborns, which they're having every 6 months, the exact same premise to not go near it because the sow ain't going near it. So they're not going to go near it. And now you're having to do this a whole different way. If that's your intention. If your intention is to put that trap out, catch a couple and use it as a deterrent, like a scarecrow in a cornfield, then you're already on top. Already on
Exactly.
top. Already
Exactly
on
right.
top.
So no, I love it, and that's I mean that all is just reflective of the work I do, but also the reason like we work so hard for
Hmm.
about 10 years. I've had conversations. I mentioned Mike Elfenbein a minute ago. I've had conversations with guys from Delta Waterfowl, and we get an issue that crops up. One that comes to mind recently is restricted hunting areas. It's about 5 years ago.
Mm.
And it was this issue where they wanted to create restricted zones that didn't allow waterfowl hunting. Um, because homeowners were worried about being shot. Now,
Mm.
in the history of the world, never been a waterfowl hunter that harmed a non-hunter. A waterfowl hunter is like discharged a gun in the boat and shot somebody or whatever, but never been a recorded case of one harming a non-hunter. The guns don't have that. I mean, you're shooting steel shot, which loses its energy really quickly and everything else.
It's also
But you look
spreading.
at an issue like yeah, you look at an issue like RHAs, and the state wanted to create this rule to where they could not deny an RHA if a municipality asked for one. And so at the rate the state is growing, we would see this wasn't about you hunting in front of a house that's been there 100 years. This is about we're going to build out every inch of Lake Toho. We're going to build out every inch of Lake Oklahoma. Like they're all going to be surrounded by houses, and you're going to force hunters off as you do that. And say nothing of the water quality impacts it's going to have with fertilizer runoff and everything else. We did not want to just say, no, we exist here and we've paid for conservation for a long time. We're going to
Yeah.
continue to exist. That's the type of issue. I'm having conversations with Delta. I'm having conversations with Safari Club and Congressional Sportsmen, and they're like, man, do you guys have a right to fish and hunt? Well, legislative, we do have a statutory right, but a statutory right could change tomorrow if they decided to change. Like the legislature could change
Yeah.
it if they want.
Yeah.
They're like, no, you need a constitutional right to fish and hunt. That way, like if it went to court or something. So this conversation is not new. We've been
No.
having it for years and years, but we could never figure out a way to get it there because you would have needed a million signatures on the ballot. You would have needed, and even in our own community, the biggest concern in all this to me in our community is people saying, well, I can't believe you trust the government to do this, or I can't believe you'd want to pass this thing and leave FWC with authority and power. And I'm like, it makes me shake my head because I'm like, man, you don't know how this works. You
Yeah.
don't understand how a constitutional right is giving us, you and me, the power to some degree. It's not saying we can then go open our AR up and kill every deer, willy-nilly.
No.
They still have to be regulated because we're conservationists. Like, we believe in that model. But if the state came along and said, yeah, you know what, we've decided we're not going to let you kill deer anymore because we're getting a lot of pressure from PETA and Humane Society to shut that down, we now have legal recourse to say, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
State, you got to keep that open because we, the people, have the right, not you, the state, can take it away from us. It's not a privilege like it is now. It becomes a right.
Mhm. No, that's a perfect point. It's a perfect point. Now, there was something I had seen on your Instagram that you had posted, and I want to say it was the other day, and I ended up sharing it on my story, and I never heard of it. And just correct me for any words that I miss on this, but it was two maps, and it was a map of the state of Florida with the WMAs throughout the state, right? And I think it was somewhere, it's roughly what, 2 million acres?
6 million acres and 5.8 million acres in the WMA system.
5.8. And your video of it was a picture, and then then it fades away to another map of what you was titled the Green Corridor, which
The
if
wildlife
I'm
corridor.
yep, the wildlife corridor. And it was what I'm assuming is in order to keep a corridor of wildlife from one side of Florida all the way down to its southernmost point. And when they overlaid over each other, they were almost exactly the same thing. Is what is there like is that a big thing that they're trying to threaten, is maybe trying to split this corridor for more businesses and more homes and more causeways and things of that nature?
So the wildlife corridor was created legislatively in 2021, I think.
Okay.
Our current agriculture commissioner, Wilton Simpson, he was the president of the Senate and championed creating the Florida Wildlife Corridor. So it is legislatively law.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea there is to create a green infrastructure basically from Florida Bay to the Okefenokee Swamp.
Mm-hmm.
So theoretically, as hunters and anglers, but also as conservationists, if a Florida panther, if the Florida panther is going to survive, they can't be geographically confined. You
Yeah.
have to have Florida panthers that are able to move, and then you get genetic diversity. You get same with deer, white-tailed deer, right?
Yeah,
Like,
there's multiple
you don't want your
species and subspecies of
you
those.
don't want your herd to be confined, because then if a disease gets, if CWD gets in there, it's not able, like, you get this genetic low end. So you want this corridor because then species are able to move, and it becomes a tool then to kind of stave off development in some ways. And there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of groups. The Florida Wildlife Corridor Foundation is probably the leading champion on this. Incredible group of people. Carlton Ward has done Path of the Panther. Like, they've worked really hard on creating this green infrastructure. We've advocated for it. And the backbone of it, which is the map that I showed you, is really WMAs, national forests, state parks, national parks. Like, there's a set of land.
Mm-hmm.
And so today in this wildlife corridor, which is the most celebrated thing in the environmental community in Florida, 19% of it was acquired with sportsman's dollars, which is the biggest single contributor as a bucket to the wildlife corridor, sportsman's dollars historically.
Yeah.
And I'll come back to that in a second. There's 5 tools. If you there's a famous author in conservation. His name's Aldo Leopold. He's the father of American conservation and the North American conservation model. He talks about the 5 tools of wildlife management, and they are the plow and the cow, the axe and the match, and the gun. The plow being agriculture, like your row crops, citrus, strawberries, whatever. The cow being ranching. The axe being timber, silviculture, whatever. The match being fire, and then the gun being hunting for management of species.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the wildlife corridor and you look at the tools that are utilized in the wildlife corridor, hunting is almost overwhelmingly the most dominant tool used currently. Because even if you have timberland, you probably are running a hunting lease on it.
Yep.
That 6 million acres that we just mentioned, some of that is state forest, which was acquired with different funds, versus federal forests like Ocala or Apalachicola, acquired with different funds. Those are federal dollars, but there's a revenue being generated off of it from hunting license sales and like from an outdoor recreation standpoint, we're the only one that's paying our share and benefiting others for paying our share. No other user group is doing that in the world. No other user group is doing that. So the wildlife corridor exists largely on the backs of sportsmen, and it's the most ballyhooed, successful, celebrated conservation project, arguably in the country right now, but for sure in the state of Florida. And I wanted to illustrate how important hunting is as a tool, because if you didn't have hunting, what happens to some of those pieces of land, those WMAs, I mean, a lot of them, yes, they're acquired now for forever, but do we diminish the impetus to acquire more of them and to put more of them out there? And we also, within the wildlife corridor, like the new tool that we kind of use is conservation easements, which is the idea that we buy the development rights from a rancher or a forester or whatever. We go in there and we say, look, you're going to keep ranching your land, but instead of us giving you $10,000 an acre, we're going to give you $3,000 an acre, and you can never sell it. You can never develop it. You can sell it, but you can't develop it. You sell the development rights. Many of those ranchers, they want to stay in business because they provide us our steaks, our food. They care about the environment. They care about the land. They grew up on it. And a lot of them can stack revenues with hunting Osceola turkeys or hunting waterfowl or alligators or whatever it is. So this folds into the idea of the reason I put that map out there and shared it and showed it that way is many people talk about the importance of ranching in the corridor, the importance of fire in the corridor, the importance of agriculture in the corridor, and the importance of timber in the corridor. We don't very often talk about the importance of hunting in the corridor. But when you look at it through that lens and you turn that map on and off and you fade it into each other, and I'm not a graphic guy, I did that in 2 minutes on my phone. But when you flip it back and forth, it's like you said, the framework and the infrastructure that's there is built on the back of the WMA system, which I don't know many non-hunters that buy a WMA permit every year. Do you?
That don't?
Like, no, everybody I know that is a hunter buys a WMA permit.
Oh, yeah.
Non-hunters, I don't know many of them that buy a WMA stamp.
No, they're not gonna.
So it's significant from a conservation standpoint. Again, it's a way to illustrate this is important to us as hunters and anglers because we want to be able to go shoot our deer, our turkey, or squirrels or whatever. It's important for us as humans to be able to connect with the outdoors, but it's also vastly important if you care about what is natural and makes this state special. Voting yes on Amendment 2 ensures that this massive tool that is used for things like the wildlife corridor continues to exist. I mean, that's a big win.
It's thoroughly impressive. It's thoroughly impressive. Even you're talking about WMAs being taken, right? Slowly but surely. And I always look at it like, say, for instance, how we implemented the tagging system, the online tagging system here. By not tagging the animal you harvest, to me, it just, whoever's looking at it is going, it's not a lot of deer here. People aren't killing enough deer. Maybe this area shouldn't be open anymore. You know, my brother lived in Virginia for work for a couple of years, and he got his hunting license up there, and he was hunting, and they were able to tell you to an approximation like how many deer were in the state of Virginia. And I want to say he said something like 12 or 13 million deer. And that's not something that we can really say because we've gone without any sort of tagging system or anything like that. But if you're not tagging, all you're saying, it's like any sort of product at work. If you don't use it, then that office says, oh, they're not saying that they're using this. They must not need it anymore. And things will be stripped faster than you can imagine.
You know, it's interesting because in Florida, like there's been a big swing in that in the last decade because used to you didn't want to share the data because you want to be protective of where I killed my deer, where I killed my turkey, whatever. But I think the best example of this is if you look at the management of red snapper in the Gulf of Mexico, which has been transitioned back to the state of Florida now because of reef fish permits and like we're using a different data set that determined, and now what the governor announced, like 114 days for red snappers.
A lot of snapper days. Biggest one ever, I think.
Yeah, the longest one ever. And then the East Coast, which is managed by the feds, they got
2 days.
1 day.
One
day
day,
this year.
2 fish, right? I think is the max that can be on the boat for one day. And and I always chop it up too. Sometimes, I get like the Atlantic side, you can go 10 miles offshore and be in your 100 foot of water. It's way easier to sit there and catch all day, every day, these snapper. Over here, it's a trip. Like it's a 2.5 hour drive to get to where you're wanting to be to catch these red snapper. And we've noticed this year that I don't know what the reason would be. Like my brother's got spots where if he drops them down, he'll pull up a 13-pound red snapper, a healthy, just a beautiful fish, right? The same the same time next year, I'll go and I'll catch my first juvenile red snapper. And I'm going, what the heck is that? And you're just like one after the other. And then you're like, well, I can't fish here no more because the more I catch them, the more I got to hope that I'm able to bleed them out and get them back down at the bottom, which it's not a fail-safe system. You're hoping that they survive. So I've seen the ups and downs of it, but when you see the governor put 114, I think it was 120
Yeah, that's right.
days of red snapper, which is unheard of because I can remember 4 years ago when he gave it to us on the weekends only
And,
and holidays.
and that's all attributed to the angling community being willing to collect data and
Mm-hmm.
share the data so that
Yeah.
we had good citizen sourced science
Mm-hmm.
to determine. And that's the opposite of what's happening on the Atlantic coast, but it exactly folds into what you're talking about with the deer tagging, like the ability for us to be able to count the animals. Now we're doing turkey reporting. The
Yep.
ability
Turkey
for us to
reporting.
count the
Yep.
animals allows us to manage the animals the best way possible, which is really, I think FWC catches a lot of heat in this state. And I'm not saying they're perfect, but they're a damn good agency that works really hard to try to get it right for us as stakeholders. And
No.
again, they're not perfect, but they really
No.
try to get it right for us as stakeholders. And so, this week, actually, when we're recording this, they now announced the exempted fishing permits on the Atlantic side.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got some creative ways they're going to allow you to go out there and I think take an aggregate bag of like 5 fish or 10 fish, regardless of species. And if you get drawn for one of those quotas, because we're going to collect that data to show like the discard mortality on red snapper and
Mm-hmm.
they think it's going to show some data that says maybe we can change the seasons and take some of that back into the state. And I don't hijack any of that away from right to fish and hunt because it's federal waters we're talking about now, which
Yeah.
aren't covered under the
Understood.
but the same way, it's important to look at we want to be good stewards of these resources. If
Mm-hmm.
you want an animal to exist, you allow it to be taken
Mm-hmm.
because hunters and anglers, the people that want to take that animal, are going to ensure that it exists. That is
Mm-hmm.
the shift in conservation that happened about 100 years ago. We're no longer going out and hunting passenger pigeons to extinction. We've been generationally conditioned now, going back to like Ding Darling and FDR and those guys. We want to make sure there are enough ducks for us to hunt next year. We want to make sure there's enough turkeys or deer or redfish or snook for us to catch next year. The incentive has to be that you can sometimes take one of those animals home.
Yes.
And that can be through a quota permit draw, it could be through a bag limit or whatever. But the incentive needs to be that you get to take something home.
Mm-hmm.
But on top of that, we're going to make sure that species exists so that we do get to take it home. Because if I don't get to take one home this year because of quotas, I want to make sure there are more of them next year so that I do get to take one home.
Yep.
Like the logic really is kind of foolproof in it.
Yeah, I mean, you can't. It's kind of like how you said you're talking about the pigeon. If you sit there and attempt to just take as many as possible, you're only limiting the amount that you ever get to hunt that creature again. Whether it be, a hold on it for 4 years, that's a long 4 years. If you're passionate about doing something and you put something on hold, like the fishing from Pine Point, that's a long time. Like if you like eating redfish, which I know plenty of people that love, and people love eating snook, and if you or if just say for instance, like you want to catch a slot snook, which to me is incredibly hard, with 4 inches to work with. They're either 27 or they're 33 inches, no matter what snook you catch. But you could catch the one finally, and you're like, there it is, and you're not going to take it home because of things that can happen over fisheries. But in that instance, it was pollution. But if you overstep that boundary, you'll never have that chance again. And you're right. Even as a hunter wanting to harvest, you're making it better by doing it. because you're
I don't know.
allowing it to exist, which is something I've never heard anyone say before. By hunting and harvesting, you're allowing it to exist. And that was actually a really awesome quote you just said there.
I don't know your kids, never met your kids,
You don't want to.
but I'm gonna bet if you take your kids fishing, that the first fish they catch when they bring it over the side of the boat, they're gonna look at you and say, "Daddy, can I keep it?" Am I
Oh, for
wrong?
sure. Oh yeah.
Like
And
that's
it was a sail cat too.
Yep. They're gonna ask if they can keep it because there's something intrinsically inside it. I mean, I used to run charters. I've taken a gajillion kids fishing in my life, including my own.
Mm-hmm.
To this day, my own will catch fish and say, "Can we keep it, Dad? Can we keep it, Dad? Like, is it big enough to keep? Is it big enough?" Like,
Yeah.
that's there's something wired into us around consumptive use. That's why we call it consumptive use, is you're going to consume part of this resource.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of conservation is to ensure that the resource is managed in a way so that we can consume it long term. Like
Yep.
but we get disconnected from that sometimes in this day and age because we get so wrapped around the axle of the biggest buck, the biggest deer, the biggest turkey,
Yeah.
like, and I'm not knocking any of that. I want to do all of it too, right?
Yeah.
I want the biggest deer. I want the most ducks. I want the prettiest ones. I want them banded.
Yeah, but if you have a game plan on what you want to do, that's just as enjoyable. That's the trophy in itself, is it not?
It is. I tell people all the time, like, the hunt was successful because you went on it.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
That you went.
the act is not called killing, it's called hunting.
Yeah.
So the hunt is successful the minute you leave your house and have departed on it. Whether you harvested or something is a different conversation, a different metric, but the
Mm-hmm.
hunt itself is successful because you went. The fishing trip is successful because you went.
Yeah. And it's also funny too, because I feel like no matter what, if I'm fishing, if I'm hunting, or if I'm just scouting, or if I'm just putting up stands, whatever it is that you're doing that has to do with the game plan there, you're having fun. Like, it's really hard to not have fun. And you can be, well, I've walked, I went to Green Swamp 3 years ago and I did 12 miles in 2 days on my feet. And I never saw an animal. It's a hard place. It's 40,000 acres, 45,000 acres, and they're in Polk County, and they don't trust Polk County folk over there, those deer. So they stay in the swamps. And I'll come home, I'm dead tired. I'm barely alive as far as being a husband or a dad when I get to the house. I'm nothing. I'm drained. And well, that sounds like it was miserable. And in my mind, I might look miserable, but for 2 straight days, I was just in the woods looking for these animals. And the only two actually that I did see was at nighttime when I was driving out, and they came running across the road. I'm like, they already knew the deal. So it's almost impossible to not have fun, no matter what.
But you were also out there, and I guarantee you saw cat-faced pines, you saw
Oh, so
water, you
much.
saw, like,
Mm-hmm.
it's incredible. Like, once you begin to slip into like the sportsman's phase of your growth as a hunter, you begin to appreciate the other stuff that matters to you. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't take away from the want
Yeah.
to accomplish your goals or anything else, but it definitely changes the perspective on how you look at time spent in the
Oh, like
woods.
a good bob white in the morning as the sun's coming up. Can't beat
Yep.
that. Can't beat
Nope.
that sound.
I still get excited. Like, I've got a ranch a rancher I work with, and there's a bobcat at his gate. And I've seen that bobcat 25 times at this point. I get excited every time I see it because it's a freaking bobcat, dude. How often
Yeah.
do you see bobcats? Like,
I've
it's
seen
just
one in the
like,
stand. One
yeah,
in the
it's just
stand.
not something. I get excited when I see a raccoon walk by because I'm used to seeing squirrels in my yard, but I saw a raccoon walk by. Like, it's just, I don't know, man. There's something primal about that connectivity to nature. And societally, we've drifted away from that substantially. A lot of what I work on is trying to connect people back to it makes us inherently human. It makes us better people, makes us kinder people. It makes us nicer people. It makes us like, it's the way we're supposed to work. It's the way we're wired to work. If we develop every inch of the state, we can't function the way we're supposed to as humans anymore
No.
because we can't go connect with what's wild and what's special.
Yeah. And damn it, you put it in good words there too. I was gonna say, because I mean, from the dawn, what you talking about, the Vermont being the first one in 1777, right? And we talked about when the state of Florida became a state in 1845. I think it is
I think it's
45.
45.
That then this was life. There was no change that would ever happen. You take that away and just instinctively that's gone from us. And what does that create? I don't even think of a world that could be, but you're taking something that the human eye and has felt and smelled and seen since the dawn of time, and you take it away for what? You know, got to get that
We
extra
look
Publix in there.
right, or another Target, another
Yeah.
Rack Room Shoe. And I like Target and Rack Room Shoes, but the there was a case last year where we got pretty involved in an issue with the Sunshine Skyway Bridge and pelican entanglements.
Okay.
And the anglers on the Skyway are fishing, and pelicans are dive bombing where they're fishing and getting entangled
Yeah.
in the fishing line. And if you don't reel them in and disentangle them, they fly off and die.
Mm-hmm.
And so it sucks because you don't want I don't want to see pelicans die. Like
I don't have any quarrels with pelicans.
yeah, no, like that's what I'm saying. Like I have a sympathetic heart, an empathetic heart. Like I've got a dog laying right there. Like I like animals. I don't want to see one suffer. At the same time, the switch isn't just, okay, pelicans are suffering. We need to close this bridge to fishing. Because that's the bridge where I went on my own as a high school student, was able to fish without my dad or anybody looking over
Some
my
of the best
shoulder.
fishing on any bridge is the Skyway Piers.
I've got a friend in a wheelchair. He takes his wheelchair there and he's able to get out and fish. He drives his van out onto the bridge and gets out of it and he fishes by himself for mackerel and he's really good at it. And your kids that are able to take their bikes and ride, like it is inherently important that we keep that connection to wild. Can we do so? It can't be binary. Pelicans are getting entangled. We have to close this bridge down.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be some steps. Can we deter the pelicans? Can we change our tactics? And we had to come to a compromise that had some restrictions on anglers on that. But the fact is, the bridge is still open.
Yeah.
And that was a really big battle. And I think it's a battle that kind of is emblematic of like the right to fish and hunt
Mm-hmm.
because we did not have any kind of legal recourse if the bridge closed. In this case, we would have some level of legal recourse if the bridge closed, which you never want to go to legal recourse. You just want to have it as a club in your bag, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
threat of that is almost greater than having to go with it. So I look at stuff like that and I'm like, man, the way the state is changing, because there are so many people moving here
Yeah.
that have no connectivity to this land.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the new Florida Cattlemen's the president of Florida Cattlemen's, like he's a volunteer, but this year's president is a gentleman named Dale Carlton. And so every year they pick a theme, and his theme for this year is loyal to the land. And that's so like that resonates really good with me because that's how I feel about it. I'm loyal to the land of Florida. Like it's not just land, it's water, it's the geographic boundaries of this
Yeah.
place. I am loyal to it and care deeply about it. And I don't know, man. I think I tell people not to be hyperbolic. This is the most important opportunity you'll ever have as a conservationist to vote on an issue in Florida.
You just have to be of sound mind to do something like that.
This is a critically important opportunity for us to vote to keep Florida wild and keep it a conservation minded state and keep that stuff at the forefront of what we're trying to do here.
You know, it was another interesting thing I saw you post too, which got me thinking. It was you had mentioned you were talking about invasive species and how people are real quick to let's wipe it out.
Mm-hmm.
And you use the example of the snail kite and how one of the main snails that they eat is an invasive snail.
Yeah.
But it does, and it does its things that might harm or whatever, but inevitably, what would the snail kite be without it? Little things like that. I thought it's interesting because again, I know I mentioned pigs being invasive, and they are. I get it. But what does happen if you completely eradicate them, which is an impossible feat, but if you did, what does happen? What flourishes that becomes problematic?
Nature abhors a vacuum, but nature, I have this fight. I'm not anti herbicide on managing aquatic plants. Like I get that you have to be able to spray, and even like the bass anglers and guys like that, like they'll encourage people to spray in certain spots because they don't want to run their $100,000 bass boat through hydrilla and burn up the impeller all the time.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, hydrilla provides really good bass habitat, provides really good duck food. It's got some functionally, it behaves pretty well as a plant for some uses that we have in a conservation world. Would I prefer that we only have native plants growing in our lakes? Absolutely, I would. But to do that, we're going to have to change how water gets into our lakes. We're going to have to change the
Hmm.
runoffs around it. We're going to have to remove a bunch of houses and a bunch of people and a bunch of roads. Like nothing is natural anymore, or everything is natural because we belong here as part of the community of conservation, if you look at it at a landscape level. So I think there's some questions that we have to wrestle with, which is why I posted what I did, which is
Hmm.
hydrilla's the devil.
Yeah.
The snails we deal with because they've saved snail kites and limpkins. Like snail kites and limpkins are not extinct largely because of this invasive snail.
It's hard enough to see a snail kite as it is, even for
Oh yeah.
researchers.
And then the third one is honeybees, which we got people out there protecting honeybees, which are an invasive species.
Hmm.
Honeybees are not native to North America. They're from Europe.
Hmm.
And we use them as pollinators and we love having them around and we all eat honey because it's got great allergen benefits and everything else. I'm not demonizing honeybees. I'm just saying, like, it's ironic, like the PR campaigns around these things are what is really different. We've got one that we're indifferent on because if we got rid of it, it would damage two birds. We got one that we hate because it's not native and it's underwater. And we've got one that we love because it's charismatic and produces sweet elixir and makes our flowers grow.
Hmm.
All about the PR around them and how the story is told. They're all three invasives and don't belong here. I'm saying functionally, in some cases, hydrilla behaves. Uh, you're not going to be able to replace it as a submerged vegetation
Yeah.
because you've impaired these systems so badly. You're not, and I'm not talking with herbicide. I'm talking you've impaired them with runoff, with human interventions, with water levels, with water, like all of these things are impairing it so much to where hydrilla may be the best plant that we can grow in the system that's no longer natural anyway.
Yeah. I was gonna say
So
at this point in time, what is natural? Is
Panthers,
it?
Panthers follow pigs around. If we end
Yeah.
up with pigs on our properties, we end up with panthers on our properties. And if you, I would think if you were to somehow magically push a button tomorrow and eliminate pigs from Florida, panthers would be the first species to suffer.
Yeah, because now you're talking about an animal that, yes, eats deer, but can they catch them as as well as they could catch, piglets and things like that that give them those meals?
Right.
You mentioned Florida Panthers real quick. Is the Florida Panther population as low as it's made out to seem, or do we just not know?
You're talking
Because I
about
feel
finding,
like a lot of people down south will always post pictures of trail cameras with panthers in them, and I've always wondered, like, is maybe like has there not been a study in the last decade to see what their growth is, or and we're like sticking to a number from 10, 15 years ago, or are they truly still dwindling down?
so I think the answer to that is both.
Hmm.
And I think the reason the answer to that is both is I think there were more panthers than we thought there were.
Hmm.
And we were starting to see more of them, more of them, more of them. And you would see hunters would always running into them in turkey blinds and stuff. You'd see the
Hmm.
videos talking about, and we do still see a lot of that. But the inverse of that is we've continued to grow at a rate to where you're seeing more mortality on panthers on roadways.
Yeah.
You're seeing more of them killed, and so you're like me, non-scientist. I don't know how many there are. It feels like there's about as many as there can be right now for what we got.
That's a
That's
great
kind
answer.
of where I'm at. And any population. There's a big controversy a few years ago because the manatees had to die off. Do you remember that? It was about 4 or 5 years ago. They called
Hmm.
it an unusual mortality event.
Hmm.
The state of Florida, some scientist somewhere could sit down and crunch how much seagrass we have and how many manatees could actually functionally live in the state.
Yeah.
And I would guess that number is between 4 and 10,000 manatees.
Yeah.
And at 7,000 manatees, we had about 1,000 die off. Should every one of them die? Probably not. But at the same time, like there's a carrying capacity somewhere in there. A male panther, I forget the number, a male panther requires a range of like 200 square miles or something. And if
Whew.
there's another male that overlaps, they'll fight to the death often. So when you think about the growth and development and we're pinching down on the
Yeah.
habitat they have, they can move north, but if they move north and there's no females for them to breed in or there's nothing, and I don't hear much talk about reintroducing panthers to Ocala or Apalachicola or Okefenokee or anything else. Like we really talk about them. We're happy to talk about them in this confined space of South Florida,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't want one in your backyard eating your cat.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's for us to watch on Disney. And I love Carlton and the work that they've done and the awareness that they've created. Like they've done a really good job around that. At the same time, like if we were serious about it, like let's restore them in other places and get them up and down the state. And like, what's the number on how many we're supposed to have? I don't know, man. I think a little bit of it is social science or social issues around. We love big charismatic animals,
Mm-hmm.
bears, panthers, manatees, etc. Charismatic megafauna is what we call them in my world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are some scientists out there that would love to have more of them. I also think there's some landowners out there that would love to get the money off of them, but also don't want to see more of them. And I
Yeah.
also think there are landowners out there, they're like, man, we want to see them restored because it's natural and what belongs here. But what does restored look like? Because if you took the square acreage of land that we have available and divided it by the number, you come out with enough habitat for like 250 panthers, which is what they say we got.
Yeah.
So I don't think I answered your question. I think I just kind of ran around it a little bit,
No,
but
and I'm not
I
looking
think
for
it's
an
a
exact
worthwhile
number
conversation.
here. Yeah,
Yeah, I
and
think
I'm
it's a
not looking
worthwhile
for an
conversation.
exact. I just, if there was a person I think I could ask, it would probably been you, just to see. You never know. You have that conversation with someone that is, they've done their studies and this and that. I've seen that complaint a lot, and whether it's a complaint or maybe a statement that, usually comes back on FWC. Like FWC says there's only this, the wrong, but da. So it was a question because they just won the Stanley Cup. For only
Yeah.
having about 250 of them, they're damn good at hockey.
You
Uh,
know, if you look, there's a South Florida deer study that was commissioned a few years back by FWC, and the University of Georgia came in and they banded deer and stud or collared deer and studied them,
hmm
and they determined that the deer herd in South Florida, so we're talking like Big Cypress,
hmm
almost exclusively is driven by hydrology, water levels.
Yeah.
And so when you look at hydrology with like Everglades restoration, we want to put more water on the landscape. Down there, I don't know if you've hunted down there, been down there, but they have tree islands. They're just higher areas. Deer and game will congregate on those tree islands. That's where the Miccosukee people would hunt, the Seminole people would hunt. Also for panthers, it becomes a little bit like shooting fish in a barrel if you have a high water year.
hmm
The deer will all congregate there and you could take them out. So of the number of deer they banded, and I forget, it was like 200, of the ones that died, 72% of them were killed by panther.
Now,
So
was
that
that? Can
doesn't
you
mean
confirm it's killed or that it died and then
no, it
eaten
was
by a
killed by
panther?
panther. Like
Killed.
they're generally they're killed by panther.
Okay.
Um, that's a pretty high number on a
hmm
pretty high mortality anyway that was driven by hydrology because it was done over Irma the year that Irma came through.
Yeah. Yep.
We had a really aberrationally high rain year, and the panthers kind of went nuts. And so in the hunting community, we want to say, well, that's a panther problem because it killed all the deer. Really, it's a water management hydrology problem that's
hmm
driving that issue.
Yeah.
But you can create a thing called a predator pit. And I think we've done that a little bit in like Big Cypress, wherein you've got panthers, you've got bears, you've got alligators, you've got pythons, you've got these animals that will just devour at an incredible rate small mammals, mesomammals, and deer, fawns, etc. And if you went back and historically looked at the deer harvest in Big Cypress, I don't have those numbers in front of me, but in the 90s, it was a really good place to go hunt deer.
hmm
Now, no one's killing deer out of it because the deer have been basically wiped out by hydrology and predators.
Yeah.
There's a time of year when bears will switch to fawns. They will target fawns, even though they would rather eat blueberries and blackberries the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Fawns are an easy prey and they're readily available for a minute. They will target them specifically. So it's the stuff that people don't like to wrestle with in conservation that it really gets into some uh I like to say conservation you cannot solve with bumper stickers. Like we like
No.
to boil everything down to like a hashtag or whatever, and
hmm
it's way too hard to do, which is why from an all Florida standpoint, we talk about being authentic in conservation. Like we're willing to sit down and have these conversations. We don't know, but
hmm
until we can wrestle with some of this stuff and fight our way through it and figure out what's wrong and what's right, like that's the only way we're going to get better.
Oh, yeah. Well put. I never thought about hydrology. Usually, when I'm not killing deer or something, it's just a me problem. I'm doing something wrong.
No,
I
dude,
must still be sweating bush light or something. I don't know.
You need a better list of excuses. Like I'll get you some excuses that you haven't even considered. You come home, your wife will be like, "Why didn't you kill a deer?" You'll be like, "Honey, it's really a hydrological problem." Like I
Yeah.
don't want to go into the science of it, but it's a hydrological problem, and then she'll
Mm.
just leave you alone.
I think last year she asked if she goes, I thought you said you were good at this. I had like my worst year in 6-7 years. It was my first year of doing I'm not shooting anything other than this one deer, and that
A
got me
target
to
deer.
that many deer. So
Awesome.
it is what it is, man. I felt like I did more conservation last year than ever before by not pulling the trigger.
Letting them walk.
Yeah. Well, hey, Travis, I thank you for coming on, man. I really do appreciate your time. I know you're probably a busy man. You've said some things in just this hour and a half that I've never even heard said. And like I said, also said some things that resonated pretty deep. So, um, before I get out of here, is there anything else that you wanted to say for something we missed, or it's just for the people, as maybe if it has to do with the amendment passing in November? Uh, anything you got that you want to put out there?
No, man, I will tell people, if you want to learn more about me and the stuff that I do, you can find me on Instagram, Travis Thompson. Or you can find our nonprofit at allfla.org is our Instagram handle, or allfla.org is our website. And then separate from that, like if you want to learn more about the amendment, there's a yesonTwoFlorida.com website
Mhm.
that has some good information there too. I'll also mention allfla.org/R2FH. So right to fish and
R2FH.
hunt, right? R the number 2 FH.
Okay.
You can go there, and we created an FAQs for people, because people have been like worried about, will this undo the net ban, or will this undo trespassing laws or anything else? Short answer, no, doesn't affect those at all. I love the net ban more than a lot of stuff. Like it's a great conservation law that we passed years ago.
Mhm.
Would never do anything to jeopardize it. So doesn't affect any of that. But if people have questions, they can reach out to me. They can DM me. They can message me or whatever. And happy to talk. Thank you for having me on, man. If people
Yeah,
got questions,
absolutely.
want us to come back, um, I'll send you some other folks that I think will be really good interviews for you too. That
Awesome.
love to talk
I
about
love
some of
that.
this stuff.
Yeah, and you know what? And if you want to, we can set in stone. We could come back later in the year as we get closer to election time and see where the mind's at, see how you're feeling. What are the
Love to do that, man.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I would too. Like I said, I really do appreciate you coming on. And Travis, have a great rest of your day, brother. And I'll
Thank you, Steven. I appreciate it.
yeah, absolutely. And keep doing what you're doing. And I appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So special thanks to Mr. Travis Thompson coming on here, reaching out, wanting to talk about the right to fish and hunt. Again, this November, Amendment 2 secures that right for us constitutionally forever. So we really want to say thank you. If you enjoyed what you listened to, please subscribe, follow, send to a buddy, rate. If you love the podcast, or if you just like it a decent amount, show some love, man. It really means a lot. If you want to watch Blue Cord Outdoors, still the only two places you can find her, YouTube and Carbon TV. Search Blue Cord Outdoors, you'll find us on there. And then also on all the social medias, on the lines, on the Facebooks, on the IGs. We're on there doing big things. Anyways, peace out, Girl Scouts. See you on the next one. I'm going to drink this Selly Banger and get a little energy. How about it? See y'all.